My name is Philip Wogart. This is Marc Barnes,
Right.
and we're going to give you a crazy presentation about VR. We're starting it off so I can give you a little introduction. You guys know VR, but since most of you tried it, but we'll go through it quickly anyways. But most importantly,
So our presentation is this is the first slide.
okay.
Hey, there we go. Okay, cool.
So we call it mixing realities because we did a big mashup. We took not just VR, but we took AR and we took mixed reality and put it all together. And in the end, we got some gameplay out of it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to introduce how this actually collaboration happened in the first place. We're both members of the VR AR Association, which is a massive global network of companies that do VR. They want to see the technology get pushed forward and what have you. And we do all sorts of stuff. 50 chapters everywhere from Vancouver to Shenzhen, and even in New Zealand we've got chapters.
Yes.
And why I joined originally was because of this committee stuff, but there's actually already within our network, over 3,000 companies that are doing VR and AR. So what I'm trying to say is with that, this technology is actually very prevalent now. It's found its day. It's been around for like donkey's years. It's been around forever, but now it's the time for it, this spatial computing. And you can see that from what Apple just announced at their big keynote and what happened at AWE with Google AR Cloud, but we'll talk about that more. So we're everywhere. But this is what we find most interesting is what Marc and I do. Marc does games, I do games, but we also want to see the technology succeed. So we're focused on, this what we call kind of field research. We took one example of mixed reality and really tried to push it as far as we could possibly take it. And in the last 9 months, you'll see what actually happened. And it's given us the opportunity to come, thank you, Chris, so we could speak here and share our little experiment with you all. I hope you enjoy it. We're also part of the Location-Based Entertainment Committee, which means the experiment had to do with actually demoing virtual reality, which is always a bit of an issue because of isolation, because of you don't see what the other person's doing, and that's kind of where what our committee is based on. We do like everything from infographics explaining how do you introduce VR to anyone in the first place, what you have to be taken care of. So we build infographics, white papers, all sorts of stuff that we just want to see the technology succeed, and that's why we spend extra time doing this kind of stuff. But what is virtual reality? Okay, I mean, maybe you already know that it's like 20, 30 years old, this kind of technology, but what is of interest to this presentation, or what's the parallel, is actually VR is a convergence of consumer tech that's happened. So it's kind of like exactly what happened with Apple in the garage scenario, building the Apple. It's exactly what Palmer Luckey did, when he first patented the design 5 years ago for the first DK1. So the convergence of these technologies, so you had two mobile displays that were strapped with duct tape to your face, and using a tracking system that came from Nintendo Wii, or the camera and the tracking. All these techs was in the hands of consumers, and it was able and possible then for VR to take off and do a Kickstarter campaign and get funded, then get bought by Facebook and all that kind of jazz. So what's really interesting about VR is this time around it was all about merging technologies, and what's the parallel is with us is that we merged even more technology together.
Yeah, we made it more complicated.
But here's the dilemma with VR. So this is so my company HEADGEAR was part of the first Oculus mobile game jam back in 2015, and you can see that it was just this was done in Unreal before Unreal actually supported VR at all. So we were like part of the few people actually trying it out. But you see the virtual world and the real world, and to make sense of it, we want to begin to merge these worlds. But this is just done probably in Adobe Premiere. He Chromecasted it from his Samsung Gear VR and then just filmed himself and then merged it together. But it gets more interesting when you can actually overlay these two worlds, and that's where where I want to talk about, what we're going to talk about today is that, like I said, VR is really old. I mean, Milgram's continuum back from '94 shows us VR, AR, and what was called back then augmented virtuality. And that's what mixed reality is, actually. That's being able to see the real world and the virtual world overlaid in one another. So you've probably seen mixed reality videos. This is Beat Saber, which is a big popular one. And being able to understand what the person is doing in VR is only possible when you can get that third-person perspective. And this can be done with green screens, or it can even be done now with, you know, a depth sense camera. These guys, Mixcast, cool company out of Vancouver, they're also part of the association. This is the technology that we used as part of our stack to get this experiment going. So, to the experiment, and Marc's going to demonstrate, because it's his game that we did to do this experiment with. The reason for mixed reality is to, of course, to be able to use it for the spectator view so that people can understand what VR looks like. But also what gets really interesting is that it's also led us to, you know, move it from a static camera to a cameraman to a person that actually, you know, is involved in the scene, to even, you know, talking about new communication patterns. And that's kind of what my company is interested in, because we're now doing a VR game, you know, with these standalone headsets where, you know, I'm in VR, you're in VR, I can see you in VR, and we can communicate and cooperate in the same space. And that's where at least we kind of see the future of this technology in terms of, you know, social VR and pushing it so that it's not an isolating experience, that it's all about, you know, finding the ways in which we want to share an experience. And that's why we think this is an important experiment in the long run. Yeah. So Marc's going to give you a little intro into the game.
Yeah, and I think another thing that people, that kind of gets overlooked a bit is the translation of what people are experiencing in VR to video. So normally when you go to an event, you'll see a little window of what the mirror display of the VR player. But trying to explain that or get these people involved is something that we wanted to actively pursue. Because with our game, it's a puzzle point and click adventure game. And I've never used one of these before. I'll click this button, see what happens. Yeah, this is the launch trailer for it. And we have no sound. So just imagine, like that. And then it goes, again like that. Like, yeah. It's really fun doing the voiceover for this thing. Yeah, this was actually filmed in my elevator because it was right at the end of production and we needed a unique launch trailer. But basically, it's a point-and-click puzzle adventure game in VR where someone that sounds suspiciously like Arnold Schwarzenegger is the president of the world and is yelling at you and telling you how to build his elevator to shoot up his approval ratings. And at the same time, there's a AI which is like his... Oh, there we go. Look at that.
Did you really?
Oh, there he is.
You could get away with something like this from behind my back?
Yeah, we released on everything but PlayStation VR so far. Oh, okay, we can watch it again.
One more time.
Yeah, okay, one more time from the top. See, I just sounded just like it.
Did you really think that you could get away with something like this from behind my back?
That's what I like to see. Explosions.
Yeah, so a super silly game. And one problem when it came to demoing this game, is this just restarted? Oh, it's the restart button. Let's just do it on yeah, there we go. So basically one way that we could, with events, we would have people like journalists come and play the game, and basically the first thing they would do would ask questions like, oh, I've got this, what am I supposed to do next? What am I supposed to do next? And it was really hard to it was a lot of work to just communicate them through the experience, because a point-and-click adventure game is something you kind of want to take time in and soak in the world and explore. But for press, they want to get through your game, and they want to get as much of the experience as they can, as possible. I don't trust that guy. Let's keep going with this.
Just cue me. And
I'll point at you like this. So basically, the first experiment came when I went round to Philips, and he showed me the mixed reality setup, and we had a Vive controller acting as the camera. And I used to be a product research manager at ROCCAT, so they'd basically show me experimental technologies, and I got to play with them. So it was a pretty rad job. But now but the first thing I thought of was, well, what if we could stream the game view that the camera is seeing to a tablet? Because then you have an active participant outside of the game that can look into the game, if that makes sense. So the first phase is a virtual camera person, and you can see that with the Vive controller, the Vive puck, and a tablet which is using which is an NVIDIA Shield, because at the time you could stream the game view to the Shield and move around the environment. And we'll go to phase 2. So we thought, let's make it more complicated, because the person in VR could just smack the tablet right out of the person's hands because they can't see where they are. So the easiest way to do that was to add a prefab in Unity, which is Rockmeyer's floating head. And that way the player in VR can communicate with the person in AR, if you want to call it that. Yeah, should we go to the next slide? Cool. And this is what it looks like. So the VR player view sees the person's tablet in 6DoF moving around the environment. And what happened with this was really cool, was that the person with the tablet was playing it like a video game where they could walk around, and they were actually solving the puzzles better than the person in VR. So it's almost like they would move Rockmeyer's head to certain points and go, hey, there's a key here. And they were talking back and forward, and it made a multiplayer experience, which is a much better way for me to demo the game to people too, is to say, hey, look at this, explore that, especially a game with a lot of Easter eggs and stuff in it. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then we thought, let's make it more complicated. And this is where, if you have a green screen, you can use Mixcast, or you can use Live to create you can create it so that the person viewing the VR world through the tablet can see the VR player in real life inside the tablet. Yeah, this is nice. This is like a game show. So so this way we used this camera to stream the image back to the computer of the real life person. And then we use the puck and the tablet to have Rockmeyer's head and to have the window through the world, and this could move in space. And I think
we were able to use the broadcasting, the streaming from XSplit to merge all these worlds together, so that in the end the cameraman or the augmented reality player actually saw everything.
Yeah.
Saw the person, saw the virtual world, and could engage.
Yeah. And the best way to explain all this really complicated stuff is to show you a video of it actually working. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is at the Miami Ad School, which we used basically as guinea pigs. They were fantastic because they basically played the game really raw and started interacting immediately. So you can see in the right-hand view, that's what she's seeing. In the left-hand view, that's what the person with the tablet's seeing. And they were automatically interacting. So the person in VR was like tickling them and stuff like that. And then with this prefab, you could even add like a raycast or anything, or even inputs if you wanted to get more complicated. Yeah, so then we had everything we needed, and we put it all together. All these consumer technologies can, apart from the puck, which is more B2B, but it all converged together. And then we presented it at the VR AR Association in Hamburg.
So end of April, we had a little gathering at Mindspace.
So what are we calling this? So this is VR, AR, MR, all the R's.
It's a mashup, baby.
It's a mashup. It's all of the R's together. So he can look around, but he can also see Philip in there. And then we can send you. Shannon could talk to you in VR as well.
You can see how confusing it
is
can
we
get.
add a prefab to this camera, to this puck. And then with this puck, we'll have a Rockmire face that Philip can see in VR.
Can you look up a little bit? Yep.
Oh, there you can see it. Yeah, and then this is footage from the launch event.
And this is where it got really social. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The car came up to
Yeah, totally. It's the camera looking at the camera looking at the camera looking at the camera. Ah! We need to recharge that.
So now you can see exactly how helpful
Do you
this
see where
thing
the little
is.
Game Boy guy is? Pick him up. Yeah, and this player, he got super into it.
Oh, a bit
was,
hurry.
Going to certain points in the elevator so that the other player could see where he could push buttons and stuff like this, and it got super interactive. And it makes a really fun play space at an event because people really want to get involved, grab the tablet and move around.
Throw it in and then push the button. Oh, that's close.
He's actually streaming himself at the same time.
That's a crazy thing.
The real world.
Yeah. And then, so basically that was it. And like even from talking to the other panelists yesterday, there's a bunch of other people moving in the same direction. Like everybody kind of wants the AR and the VR to kind of converge in a very, so the X, Y, and Z coordinates from phones and from headsets become ubiquitous so that these technologies can act with each other seamlessly. That's the dream. And Breach VR in Norway are actually doing this with 3DoF tracking in WebVR, so you can log into a scene and you can look around with your phone. Yeah.
Oh, and the other one is like meeting rooms. So, like, again, this is not just about gaming. So, okay, today, everyone that's on the panel, all gamers and game developers, but the technology is for everything. It can be used in every such way. And that's what, Meeting Room is about, for example. It's a work collaboration tool in which people can meet, whether it's in VR or on a desktop or on a tablet or what have you, no matter what screen, that you can actually engage in this kind of spatial computing or spatialized digital world, and that it's merging, the multi-channel, omni-channel broadcast idea. But what we think of the future, again, what I was mentioning about the AR cloud stuff, it gets interesting when we can actually converge these technologies so that when we're tracking the real world and the digital world and being able to overlay them both. I think it's really exciting. We're currently working on a mobile AR project with, AR Core and AR Kit, and now the next level, the big stuff is about the AR cloud being able to, have SLAM be able to produce the same kind of results on 2 devices and being able to track the real world but also the digital world, and that's kind of where it gets really interesting with there's lots of alliances and associations, what have you, but we think this technology is best done amongst our peers in a collaborative manner.
I mean, at the moment, everything I just showed you could do tomorrow. If you've got a Vive game at home, all you need to do is just get an extra controller. It's a camera, stream it to a tablet with Steam VR's streaming service right now. You could do that immediately and already have a more flexible demo. If you wanted to add a prefab to your own game in Unity, you could do that and you already have another layer. And then if you want to go crazy, you can add the Mixcast stuff. So it's technology that's in parts, but eventually we kind of all want it to be one person's in VR, one person whips out their phone, it's an app, and they're immediately playing together, so it's ubiquitous. That would be the coolest sort of solution, is have it all squished together.
I mean, even HTC is doing that now with getting streaming it to the mobile phone, so that these standalone devices, because no one's going to give up their iPhone for an Android mobile device, but these things that have just come out this year makes it a lot more interesting, where they can be a shared device in the family or in the office or what have you. These standalone devices make it super easy, no more cables, all this kind of stuff. And I think it's very exciting what's coming this year, and being able to stream between phone and standalone VR device gets very exciting.
Yeah, totally. Cool. And that's it. And thanks for listening and getting up and coming and seeing us after a night of partying. Thanks. Thank you.